Nobody in my community ever told me what would happen if I did not get pregnant. There was no conversation, no warning. No woman pulled me aside before the wedding and said, "If your body does not do what it is supposed to do, here is what comes next." She did not need to say it, because I had already watched it happen. I had watched the way the community shifted around a woman whose belly stayed flat past the first autumn. The way the questions at Sunday dinner stopped being curious and became careful. The way her husband started volunteering for longer barn work. The way the other wives stopped inviting her to quilting circles where they discussed names and nurseries. I watched all of it before it happened to me. And when it happened to me, I recognized every single stage. The way you recognize a disease you have seen take someone else. I was standing at my kitchen window when I understood. November. First frost on the glass. My husband already in the barn. The house so quiet I could hear the clock in the next room. What I am about to explain to you is not written in any ordnung. No bishop has ever preached it from any pulpit. But every married woman inside my former community understood it before she could have put language to it. She understood it in her body, in the way her stomach tightened when someone asked how long she had been married. If you have ever wondered what really happens inside those farmhouses, not the postcard version, not the tourist version, not the version the community wants you to believe, then I need you to stay. Subscribe to this channel, because every person who hears this testimony becomes part of the record. And the record matters. I need to tell you how the system works before I can tell you what it did to me. Because what my husband did, it was not him. It was not his invention. It was not some private cruelty he designed in his own heart. What he did was what the system had already decided should happen. He was the delivery mechanism. The system was the sender. And the message had been written generations before either of us was born. So let me start where the system starts. Let me start with what I was taught. I was 14 years old when I first understood that children were not a choice. I did not learn this in a single conversation. I learned it the way you learn gravity, by living inside it so long that you forget it is a force. In our community, children were God's blessing. That sentence sounds gentle. It is not. Because if children are God's blessing, then the absence of children is the absence of God's blessing. And the absence of God's blessing is not a medical condition. It is a spiritual verdict. No one ever said the word cursed. They did not have to. The mathematics did the work on its own. Blessed is the woman whose quiver is full. If full is blessed, then empty is the thing no one will say out loud at the dinner table, but everyone is thinking behind their hands. I remember the room where this was made clear to me, not at 14, later, 3 weeks before my wedding. My mother sat me down in the back room of our house. The light was coming through the window at an angle that cut across the floorboards. She folded her hands in her lap the way she always did when she was about to say something she considered important. And she told me that my first duty as a wife, not my only duty, she was careful to say, but my first, was to be fruitful. She said it with love. She said it with warmth. She said it as if she were giving me a gift, a piece of wisdom passed from mother to daughter like a recipe or a quilt pattern, and I received it that way. I did not hear a contract being read. I heard a mother preparing her daughter for a blessed life. That is how the system works. It delivers its terms wrapped in love, and you sign without knowing you are signing. The second thing the system requires is surveillance. Not cameras, not records, eyes. In a closed community, a married woman's body is not private. It belongs to the community the way the farmland belongs to the community. It is a shared resource, and its productivity is everyone's concern. I did not understand this until my first year of marriage. The women visited. They brought food. They asked how I was feeling, and their eyes dropped to my midsection when they asked. It was gentle. It was consistent. It was every single visit. My mother-in-law came for Sunday dinner every week, and every week her gaze found my waistline before it found my face. I remember a specific Sunday, 6 months into my marriage. A woman at the table, a deacon's wife, smiled at me over the bread and said, "Any news?" The table went quiet. Not awkward quiet, diagnostic quiet. The kind of silence that waits for a specific answer, and the absence of that answer is the answer. I smiled. I said not yet, and I watched the table absorb that information like a body absorbing a test result. Something shifted. Not dramatically, just a degree. The warmth did not disappear, it just became conditional in a way I could feel but could not name. The third mechanic is what the system promises a husband. It does not promise him a wife. It promises him a mother for his children. His marriage is not a partnership. It is a production arrangement blessed by God, and he is the manager of that arrangement. When she does not produce, is broken. Not my ovaries, my faith, my obedience, my submission. I reviewed my own life like a woman searching a house for a gas leak. Every moment of doubt I had ever experienced, every flicker of resentment, every time I had thought something ungenerous about my husband or my community, I cataloged them. I built a case against myself with the precision of a prosecutor, and the verdict was always the same. I had not been good enough. That is why the blessing was not coming. I remember the evening I apologized to my husband, not for anything I had done, for what my body would not do. I stood in the kitchen. Supper was on the table. He was washing his hands at the sink, and I said, "I am sorry." He looked at me, and his face did something complicated. It was not cruel. It was not cold. It was confused, because he did not have language for what was happening either. But he did not say, "You have nothing to be sorry for." He did not say, "This is not your fault." He dried his hands on the towel. He sat down. He said, "Let us eat." And his silence was the system's answer, delivered through the nearest available mouth. The apology had been accepted, which meant the apology had been appropriate, which meant the fault was mine. The system did not need him to say anything cruel. His silence was enough. And I carried that silence like a stone in my chest for years. The system takes your connections next. It does it the way frost takes a garden. You do not see it happening in the dark, but in the morning everything is different. My mother-in-law brought me a small jar of herbal tea one afternoon. She set it on the counter without ceremony. She said her own mother had used it, years ago, when things were slow. She said it with kindness. She touched my shoulder, and I understood in that touch that my situation had been discussed. In kitchens I was not in, by women who loved me. My body was a community concern now. My failure was a topic of gentle, earnest, devastating conversation happening behind walls I could not see through, but could feel closing in. The quilting circle was where I lost my friends. Not through argument, through absence. They were pregnant, most of them. Their conversations had moved into a country I could not enter. Names, nurseries, the specific exhaustion of early motherhood. I sat with my needle and my fabric, and I listened, and I said nothing. And the nothing I said grew louder each week, until I was sitting in a room full of women, and I was completely, architecturally, alone. There is a consequence I will not describe here. Every woman listening who has ever had her worth measured by what her body could produce already knows which one I am not naming. I do not need to say it. Your body remembers it. Mine does too. What I will tell you is this. By the third year, I could not answer the question, "What do you want?" Not because I was afraid to answer, because the answer was gone. It had been replaced. Where a woman with preferences and desires and small private joys used to live, there was now a function, a failed function, an unresolved question walking through a house, cooking meals, folding laundry, performing a life she was no longer inside of. I caught my reflection in the window one evening, not the mirror, the window, the dark glass over the kitchen sink, and I did not recognize what I saw, not my face. My face was the same. What was missing was behind it. The woman I had been before the system turned my body into a test I could not pass. She was gone. And I could not remember when she left. I only knew that the house was quieter without her, and no one else had noticed she was missing. If you are sitting somewhere right now and your breath has changed, if something in your chest has tightened and you do not have language for why, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe. Not because this channel needs numbers, because this testimony needs witnesses. Every person who stays is another piece of evidence that what I am describing was real, that it happened, that it mattered, that the silence was not peace, it was architecture. And I need you to stay for what comes next, because what comes next is the meaning. The part the system never wanted you to understand. The part that changes the way you see every quiet house you have ever driven past. The breaking point did not look like a breaking point. That is something no one tells you. You imagine it as a moment of clarity, a door slamming, a suitcase packed, a voice raised for the first time. Mine was none of those things. Mine was a Tuesday. I was hanging laundry on the line behind the house. November again. The sheets were heavy with water and the wind was pulling them sideways, and I was pinning them the way I had pinned them 1,000 times before. And my hands stopped. Not because I decided to stop, not because a thought arrived. My hands stopped the way a machine stops when something inside it has finally worn through. I stood there with a wet sheet in one hand and a clothespin in the other, and I could not move. The wind was pressing the sheet against my body, and I could feel the cold water soaking through my dress, and I did not step back. I did not adjust. I stood there, and somewhere underneath the theology and the duty and the years of monthly verdicts and the silence that had replaced my name, something in me refused. Not my mind. My mind was still obedient. My mind was still calculating what I had done wrong. It was my body. My body refused. My body, which the system had turned into a courtroom, a report card, a production facility, a monthly failure. My body said no. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a woman standing still in the wind with a wet sheet and the sudden physical understanding that she could not do this for one more day. I did not leave that day. I did not leave for months, but the refusal had happened. And once the body refuses, the mind cannot unknow it. It is like a crack in a foundation. You can keep living in the house, but you can hear the wind through it now, and you know. It was a therapist, 2 years later, in a small office in a town 40 minutes from the community I had left, who gave the system its name. I had been talking for an hour. I had been describing what I have just described to you. The surveillance, the silence, the monthly verdicts, the way my husband's distance was not personal but procedural, the way the community's warmth was not withdrawn but renegotiated based on my body's output. And she stopped me. She took off her glasses. She said, "What you are describing has been studied. It has a name. It is called coercive reproductive control within a closed institutional system." She said, "Your fertility was not treated as a medical reality. It was treated as a compliance metric. Your value was made conditional on a biological outcome you could not control. And when that outcome did not occur, the system activated protocols designed to pressure, isolate, and diminish you until you either produced or disappeared." She said, "This is documented. It is researched. It is a recognized pattern. You did not invent this experience. You were subjected to a design." She said it the way a doctor reads a scan, calm, certain, not asking me if it was true, telling me that it had been proved. I sat in that chair and I did not cry. I went still, the way I had gone still at the clothesline, because the word did not change what had happened, but it confirmed that what had happened was real, that it had architecture, that it had been built, not by my husband, not by my mother-in-law, not by the bishop, but by generations of logic stacked on top of each other until the structure was so solid that the people living inside it mistook it for God's design. The word gave me something I had not had in years. It gave me a floor to stand on that was not made of my own guilt. I need to say this clearly because it matters. Naming the system is not the same as hating the people inside it. My husband was not a monster. He was a man who inherited a blueprint and followed it the way his father had followed it, and his father before him. He was given tools and told they were love. He used them. My mother-in-law was not cruel. She was a woman who had survived the same system by mastering its rules, and she was trying to hand me the same survival manual. The bishop was not a tyrant. He was a man maintaining a structure he was taught was holy. The system does not need monsters. It does not need cruelty. It does not need anyone to be evil. It needs compliance. And compliance is what good people give when they believe the structure they are maintaining is sacred. He did not design the system. He was its most faithful employee, and he did not know he was employed. What I lived through inside that community, it is not only about the Amish. I need you to hear that. It is not one community's failure. It is the logic of any system that decides a woman's value based on what her body produces. It is the logic of the marriage where love gets quieter when she stops being useful. It is the logic of the family that celebrates the daughter who achieves and grows silent around the daughter who struggles. It is the logic of the office where her worth is measured in output and her humanity is an inconvenience the spreadsheet does not have a column for. The theology changes, the language changes, the farmhouse becomes an apartment, the Ordnung becomes an employee handbook, the bishop becomes a manager, the Sunday dinner table becomes a performance review, but the architecture is the same. Wherever a woman's belonging is conditional on her production, wherever she must earn the right to be valued by a body or a performance or a silence that costs her everything, this system is operating. The wind that pressed that wet sheet against my dress on that November clothesline, that wind blows against every house where a woman's worth has terms she did not write and cannot meet. If you have ever felt your value shrink when your body did not perform the way someone needed it to, I see you. If you have ever apologized, not for something you did, but for something you could not be, I see you. If you have ever made yourself smaller, quieter, more useful, more compliant, hoping that if you were enough of everything else, they would stop measuring the one thing you could not provide, I see you. If you have ever loved someone and understood, in the quietest part of the night, that their love for you had conditions you did not write and could not renegotiate, I see you. This testimony is not just mine, it is evidence. And your experience, in whatever house, whatever community, whatever system required your silence as the price of your belonging, your experience is evidence too. Evidence does not need permission to exist. It does not need to be approved by the people who built the system. It does not need to wait for the right moment or the right voice or the right amount of proof. It exists because you lived it. That is enough. You are enough. You were always enough. The system measured wrong. If this testimony named something you have been carrying in your body, something you have not had words for until now, I am asking you to leave one word in the comments. You do not have to explain. You do not have to tell your story. Just name the consequence no one talks about, the one you carry, the one that does not have language yet. Name it. Because the moment you name it, it becomes part of the record, and this comment section is the record now. Share this with the woman who needs to hear it. You know who she is. She is the one who has been saying, "I am fine," in a voice designed to prevent the next question. Send her this. She deserves to know the system has a name. Your body is not a contract. Your worth is not a production schedule. And your belonging, the real kind, the kind that does not come with terms written in someone else's handwriting, that belonging does not require you to produce anything at all.